If you watched this show as a kid, let me tell you something. You missed half the story. Don't worry, so did I. Back then, we were just watching for the action. Bad guy shows up, Spider-Man wins, episode over. But underneath all that was this huge connected saga we never even noticed. And look, I'll just say it. If I love Spider-Man today, and I mean genuinely love this character with my whole chest, it's because of this show. My room, my backpack, my shirts, everything was covered in webs, and it all started right here. In my eyes, this is still the greatest superhero series ever made. So recently I rewatched the entire thing, start to finish, and I was stunned by how much I'd forgotten and how much I straight up never understood as a kid. Now every piece clicks into place. Today I'm walking you through the whole story, from the first episode to that bittersweet ending fans debated for decades. Quick disclaimer, every opinion and roast in here is mine alone, and if you love deep dives like this, subscribe and join the family, because the algorithm is cruel and we might never cross paths again. Oh, and before we swing in, some housekeeping. This video exists because of you. When I covered the entire story of the 90s X-Men show, the comments flooded in asking for this one next. So here it is. And listen, if you want me to keep going through the 90s Marvel cartoons after this, tell me which one, Hulk, Fantastic Four, or Iron Man. I could even do a whole separate video on the Secret Wars crossover event that ran through those shows. Your call, my keyboard. Alright, New York City, 1994. Let's go. A Spider-Man who skips the origin. Thank goodness. Here's the first thing that makes this show special. No origin episode. None. We meet Peter Parker already in college, at Empire State University, already Spider-Man, already juggling freelance photos for the Daily Bugle. Uncle Ben is already gone, the lesson already learned. And honestly, bless them for it. We've all seen the spider bite 100 times. This show respected your time and jumped straight into the good stuff. The second thing, and this one's huge, the main villain of this series is not the Green Goblin, it's the Kingpin. Wilson Fisk sits at the center of almost everything, like a giant spider of his own, funding mad scientists, building villain teams, pulling strings from a fortress hidden inside the Chrysler Building. The showrunner, John Semper, loved Kingpin as a classic 60s Spider-Man villain and hated that the comics had handed him off to Daredevil. So he took him back, bold move, and it works beautifully. And the third thing, the one that almost got someone fired. Back then, kids' cartoons were basically forbidden from telling season-long stories. Every episode had to stand alone so reruns could air in any order. Semper ignored that rule, quietly built connected arcs anyway, and nearly lost his job over it. He said he'd do it again, because ongoing stories force you to pay attention and make everything feel epic. The man risked his career so this show could have an actual plot. Respect. Season 1. The web gets built. The very first episode is Night of the Lizard, where Dr. Kurt Connors, Peter's own professor, injects himself with lizard DNA, trying to regrow his missing arm, and turns into a monster in the sewers. Great pilot, genuinely creepy for a kids show. And right away we meet the Daily Bugle crew, including the one and only J. Jonah Jameson, voiced by Ed Asner, screaming about Spider-Man being a menace. Now here's a detail the show adds that I never caught as a kid. This version of Jameson has a reason for hating masks. His wife was taken from him by a masked gunman years ago. That's why a man in a mask, any mask, makes his blood boil. One little scene and suddenly the loudest joke character in Spider-Man history becomes a grieving husband. That's good writing. And the series wastes no time building its web of connections. Early on we meet Spencer Smythe, a desperate inventor building robot spider slayers for Norman Osborn to hunt our hero. When a mission goes wrong, Spencer is lost in an explosion, and his son Alistair dedicates his whole life to avenging him, becoming the Kingpin's top weapons designer. So the show's very first tragedy creates a recurring villain whose entire motive is a dead father. Notice the pattern yet? Fathers and sons haunt this entire series. Smythe and his dad, Harry and Norman, Peter and the ghost of Uncle Ben. Kid me saw cool robots. Adult me sees a theme statement. Season 1 basically runs through the greatest hits with a twist. Jameson himself funds the creation of the Scorpion, hiring a sleazy private eye named Mac Gargan to get mutated in a machine called the Neogenic Recombinator. Remember that machine? It becomes the engine of half this series. Gargan comes out with a tail, goes insane, and Jameson realizes he built a monster with his own hate. Dr. Octopus shows up as Peter's former childhood teacher, which makes every fight between them weirdly personal. Mysterio arrives too, framing Spider-Man for robberies using nothing but movie tricks, and his episode ends with a fight inside an abandoned film studio full of animatronic monsters and holographic illusions. A washed-up special effects artist weaponizing Hollywood against a superhero. What a concept, and the movies still haven't done it justice. Don't even get me started on what they did to him in the Toby era. The Hobgoblin arrives too, and get this, Norman Osborn is the one who hires him to take out the Kingpin. This show planted Osborn as a shady businessman 2 full seasons before his big turn. Kid me noticed none of this. Adult me is applauding. But the crown jewel of season 1 is the alien costume saga. A space shuttle crash lands carrying a black goo that bonds to Peter while he sleeps. The black suit looks incredible, makes him stronger, and slowly poisons his personality. He gets aggressive, cruel, he scares his own friends, and the show did something brilliant here. There's a nightmare sequence pulled straight from Amazing Spider-Man issue 258, where the suit and his classic costume literally fight over his body. Chills. Peter finally figures out the symbiote hates loud sound and rips it off in a church bell tower, screaming as the bells hammer it loose. And yes, if that scene feels familiar, it's because Sam Raimi lifted that exact bell tower moment for Tobey's 3rd movie. The iconic film scene you love is this cartoon's kid, not the other way around. And then the suit finds Eddie Brock, the reporter whose career Peter accidentally wrecked, who blames Spider-Man for everything wrong in his life. The symbiote gives Eddie all of Spider-Man's powers plus every ounce of his hatred, and Venom is born, stronger than Peter, invisible to his spider sense. And worst of all, he knows exactly who's under the mask. Imagine that for a second. A monster who hates you, outclasses you, and can walk up to your aunt's front door whenever he feels like it. Venom terrified an entire generation, me included, and he earned it. Quick pause. If you're enjoying this trip back in time, tap that like button. It genuinely helps more than you know. And drop a comment. Which villain from this show scared you most as a kid? I already told you mine. Okay, Season 2, where things get weird. Season 2, Neogenic Nightmare. Peter versus his own body. Season 2 opens with the Kingpin assembling 6 villains into a team to finally end Spider-Man. In the comics, they're the Sinister Six. Here they're called the Insidious Six. Why the name change? Because the censors said the word sinister was too scary for children, while the X-Men cartoon down the hall was running a villain literally named Mr. Sinister. Make it make sense. Anyway, hold that thought, because the censorship stories in this show deserve their own section and we're getting there. The real spine of Season 2 is much darker than any villain team. Peter's powers start failing, then they start changing. The spider DNA in his blood is unstable, and episode by episode he's mutating. He grows 4 extra arms at one point. Eventually the disease wins completely, and Peter transforms into the man-spider, a giant feral spider creature with no mind left, no Peter left. His greatest enemy all season isn't a person, it's his own body with a countdown attached. For a Saturday morning cartoon, that is shockingly heavy, and I love it. This arc also pulls in guest stars, because Peter goes hunting for anyone on Earth who understands mutation, which means yes, the X-Men show up, the actual 90s X-Men, with the same voice cast, and Peter begs Professor Xavier and Beast for a cure. Beast, being the sweetheart he is, actually tries to help. We also get Kraven the Hunter, and in a genuinely great twist, Kraven is the one who helps hunt down the man-spider to save Peter, rather than mount him on a wall. Meanwhile, a scientist named Michael Morbius steals Peter's blood sample, gets bitten by a mutated bat mid-experiment, and becomes a living vampire. Except, censorship strikes again. Morbius was banned from drinking blood, or even saying the word. So this vampire feeds on, and I quote, plasma, through suckers on his palms. A vampire, who says plasma, and drinks through his hands. Whatever gets us to air, I guess. Oh, and because a plasma-drinking vampire wasn't enough, this season also introduces Blade. Yes, the vampire hunter, half human, half vampire, sword and all. Years before Wesley Snipes made him a movie star, he shows up hunting Morbius, clashes with Spider-Man over whether Morbius deserves saving, and their uneasy team-up is one of Season 2's best threads. This one cartoon was quietly building a whole Marvel universe while nobody was looking. Also, the Punisher is in this season, in a kid's cartoon. Obviously, they couldn't let Frank Castle do Frank Castle things, so this Punisher fights with concussion blasters, energy nets, and at one point an actual jetpack. He spends 2 episodes hunting the man-spider, gets absolutely wrecked by it, and honestly watching the scariest man in Marvel get tossed around by a giant spider monster is peak entertainment. Season 2 ends with Peter cured, briefly, and it's one of the most creative seasons of superhero television ever aired. Fight me. Okay, story break. Let's talk censorship, because you will not believe these rules. Everything you've heard so far was made under some of the strictest broadcast rules in cartoon history, and the workarounds are legendary. Nobody in this show is allowed to die, ever. The words die, death, and kill were banned outright. So what did the writers do? They invented interdimensional portals as a metaphor. When a character needed to be gone forever, a portal would open and swallow them. Kids saw a cool sci-fi moment. The writers knew exactly what that portal meant. That's genuinely clever and slightly haunting. It gets better. Spider-Man was not allowed to punch anyone. Real fists rarely connect in this entire series. It's all webs, kicks that miss, and creative choreography. Breaking glass was considered too violent. Realistic guns got swapped for glowing laser blasters, which is why every street thug in New York is apparently armed like a stormtrooper. And the two censor notes the showrunner loved reading out loud at conventions? One said, "Caution, when Spider-Man lands on the roof, make sure he does not harm any pigeons." The other said, "You may send a villain to jail, but you may not give him a bus ticket to Florida. I need you to sit with that. Pigeon safety and villain travel plans." That was the battlefield these writers fought on, and they still made something this ambitious. Legends. Season 3. Sins of the Fathers. The Goblin finally rises. Season 3 is where the show plays its biggest card. Norman Osborn, cornered by the Kingpin, desperate and unstable, gets caught in a gas explosion at Oscorp and comes out the other side as the Green Goblin. And this version is fascinating, because the Goblin is written almost like a separate personality wearing Norman's face, whispering to him in mirrors. Harry watches his father unravel in real time. It's a tragedy in slow motion, and the show commits to it. This season is stacked. Felicia Hardy, the rich girl Peter kept flaking on, inherits her own storyline that turns her into the Black Cat. And here's a lore bomb. Her powers in this show come from a recreated version of the same super soldier formula that made Captain America. That's right, this cartoon quietly connected Black Cat's origin to Cap. Wild. We also get my favorite quiet episode of the entire series, where Spider-Man visits a sick little girl named Taina, who collects everything about him, and he tells her his origin story. Spider bite, wrestling, Uncle Ben, all of it, just the two of them in her bedroom. It's adapted from 2 classic comics, including the legendary story about the kid who collects Spider-Man, and it's the beating heart of the whole show. No fights worth mentioning, just Peter being kind. I tear up every single time. I don't care. Season 3 also introduces the strangest character in the entire show, Madam Web, an ancient, cryptic woman connected to the web of destiny itself, who keeps appearing out of nowhere to test Peter with riddles and vanish. She tells him he's being prepared for something bigger, for a battle he cannot imagine yet. Kid Me found her annoying, and honestly, so did Peter. He complains about her constantly, and it's hilarious. But keep this mysterious lady in your pocket, because everything she's hinting at pays off in the finale, and when it does, you'll want to go back and rewatch every cryptic word. And then there's the arc that terrified me more than anything else on this list. Venom comes back, and he doesn't come back alone. The symbiote returns to Eddie Brock, and a second, redder, far more vicious offspring bonds with a locked-up madman named Cletus Cassidy. Carnage is born. And where Venom at least had rules, a twisted sense of honor, Carnage has nothing. He's pure appetite with a smile. The show ties the whole thing to the demon lord Dormammu, who needs life energy harvested from our world, and Carnage becomes his happy little collector, draining people across the city. A kids show gave us an interdimensional demon feeding scheme, run by a grinning serial menace in red. How did this air on Saturday mornings? And most importantly, remember Carnage. That name comes back at the end of everything, bigger than you can possibly guess. Season 3 ends with an all-timer. The Green Goblin discovers Spider-Man's secret identity, kidnaps Mary Jane, and in the fight that follows on the George Washington Bridge, MJ falls. Not to her end, the censors would never, but into one of those interdimensional portals opened by the Goblin's own time dilation gadget, gone without a trace. And then the Goblin himself gets swallowed by a portal too. Peter is left standing on that bridge having lost the woman he loves with no body, no answer, no closure. Any adult watching knows exactly which comic story this is echoing. The fall of Gwen Stacy, rebuilt for television with the sharp edges sanded off but the grief left fully intact. A kids show ended a season on pure heartbreak, and we just watched cartoons like that back then, apparently. Season 4, Partners in Danger, and the return that was too good to be true. Season 4 opens with the Black Cat storyline taking center stage, and she's fantastic this season, saving Peter's life, fighting beside him, slowly stealing scenes. Morbius returns, and the Vulture gets a genuinely unsettling upgrade, an old man who literally drains the youth out of people to make himself young again, and at one point he drains Peter and absorbs his neogenic mess along with it, an elderly villain stealing a young hero's actual lifespan. That's nightmare material dressed in green feathers, and the show plays it completely straight. But let's be honest, the season belongs to one moment. Mary Jane comes back. She just appears, with no memory of where she's been, and Peter, overjoyed, doesn't ask nearly enough questions. My man was so happy he skipped the entire investigation phase. And you, the adult viewer, you feel it immediately. Something is off about this. Hold that feeling. Now, real talk, since we're deep in MJ territory, this version of Mary Jane might test your patience. The comics MJ, or Kirsten Dunst in the Raimi films, I get the appeal, total sweethearts. This one runs hot and cold on Peter constantly, dates his rival, dates his best friend, storms off mid-conversation on the regular. Sometimes I'm watching like, Peter, my guy, what exactly do you see here? And then I remember he's Peter Parker, the patron saint of terrible luck, and honestly sometimes I just feel sorry for the man. How is one person this unlucky? He finally proposes, she finally says yes, and the wedding episode is pure chaos. Harry crashes it as the second Green Goblin, the Scorpion crashes it too, and Black Cat swings in to help contain the mess. Even Peter's wedding needs a fight scene. Of course it does. Season 5, the truth about Mary Jane, and then the universe breaks open. Season 5 wastes no time detonating the bomb. It starts with Hydro Man, the walking water villain from Season 2, coming back obsessed with Mary Jane. And during that mess, the truth finally spills out. The Mary Jane that Peter married is not Mary Jane. She's a clone, created by Miles Warren, a name comic readers just flinched at, working with the Green Goblin's resources. And this clone is unstable. In one of the most quietly devastating scenes in 90s animation, she loses cohesion and dissolves into water in front of Peter's eyes, his wife, Water. And the real Mary Jane is still lost in the portals somewhere. So Peter has now lost her twice, and one of those times he lost a version of her that loved him completely and never even knew she wasn't real. This show was supposed to be for children. I'm fine. Let's keep going. From there, Season 5 goes bigger than any superhero cartoon had ever gone. First, the Six Forgotten Warriors saga, where Peter travels to Russia chasing the truth about his parents and uncovers a buried piece of history. Captain America once led a team of 6 wartime heroes who locked away a doomsday weapon behind 6 keys, and Cap himself vanished into an energy vortex, trapping the Red Skull with him. The Kingpin wants those keys, and the arc reaches into Peter's own living room, because one of the warriors turns out to be an old friend of Uncle Ben, a man whose story about power and its price is the very reason Ben later taught Peter that great power comes with great responsibility. The most famous sentence in comics, and this show gave it a secret origin. Peter also learns his parents were accused traitors who were actually double agents, clearing the family name he spent his whole life doubting, and we get Captain America fighting alongside Spider-Man, decades of history colliding in one arc. As a kid, I had no clue who half these Golden Age characters were. As an adult, this arc is a love letter to Marvel history. And now, the reason you clicked, the 2 arcs that changed cartoons forever. The Beyonder arrives, a being beyond all reality, who scoops Spider-Man out of New York and drops him into an experiment, an entire planet where the worst villains in existence, led by Dr. Doom, have been handed a world to conquer. The Red Skull carves out an empire, Doom builds a kingdom and, in classic Doom fashion, actually rules it well. And Spider-Man, of all people, is chosen to fix it. The Beyonder lets him recruit a team, so Peter summons the Fantastic Four, Iron Man, Storm from the X-Men, Captain America, and the Hulk. This is the Secret Wars, the legendary '84 comic event, adapted for a Spider-Man cartoon, with our webhead as the leader. Watching him give orders to Iron Man and Cap while doubting himself every second is exactly the Peter Parker experience. Maximum responsibility, zero confidence, somehow wins anyway. And the arc saves its best twist for Doom himself, who pulls his signature move and steals the Beyonder's own power, becoming a god for one shining moment. The animated Doom with omnipotence is exactly as dramatic as you'd hope, and the way that story resolves says more about Victor Von Doom's soul than most of his comics do. I won't spoil every beat. Some things you should see with your own eyes. But why was Spider-Man chosen to lead? That question is the setup for the finale. The Beyonder reveals the truth. All of it was a test, a trial run, because across the multiverse, in another reality, something has gone catastrophically wrong. A version of Peter Parker, one who never beat his clone crisis, one who let grief hollow him out completely, has bonded with the Carnage symbiote and become Spider Carnage. And Spider Carnage isn't planning a crime spree. He's building a device to erase every reality that exists. All of them, every universe, gone. So the Beyonder and Madam Web assemble a team to stop him, and it's a team of Spider-Men from across the multiverse. Let that sink in for a second, because this is 1998. There's an armored Spider-Man in metal plating, a billionaire Spider-Man whose company owns half his city, the Scarlet Spider, Ben Reilly, a clone hero from a reality where the clone saga played out differently, a powerless Peter Parker who's just an actor, and our Peter, chosen to lead them because his test taught him to command heroes stronger than himself. The finale of this show invented the Spider-Verse on television, decades before the movies. The showrunner has openly said he believes this arc inspired the Spider-Verse storyline in the comics that later became the films. When you watched Miles meet a dozen spider people on the big screen and lost your mind, this cartoon did it first, and a whole generation of us were sitting in that theater feeling like we'd seen this dream before, because we had, on Saturday mornings. The final battle is genuinely operatic. Spider-Carnage escapes to a reality where everything went right, where Peter Parker is rich, beloved, publicly adored, engaged to Gwen Stacy. Yes, Gwen appears, in the final episode, as the fiancée of a Peter who never lost anyone. Our Peter follows him there. And when fighting fails, he does the most Spider-Man thing imaginable. He doesn't throw a final punch. He brings Uncle Ben. In this perfect reality, Ben Parker is still alive, and our Peter, voice shaking, meeting the uncle he lost as a teenager, asks him to talk to the broken Peter inside Spider-Carnage. And Ben does. He reaches him. For one moment, the real Peter surfaces from underneath the symbiote, and knowing he can't hold it back for long, he chooses to open a portal and carry the threat out of existence himself. A destroyed, grieving Peter Parker spends his final act saving every universe at once, and our Peter gets to hear Uncle Ben say he's proud of him. If you didn't feel that as a kid, you were built different. I was not. I am still not. The ending, and the 26-year wait. After the battle, there's one last gift. Madam Web takes our Spider-Man to meet one final person, his creator, Stan Lee, himself, animated, voiced by the man, swinging through New York on Spider-Man's back, being told he's the reason any of this exists. It's one of the sweetest fourth-wall moments in animation history. And then, the very last scene of the entire series. Madam Web finally agrees to take Peter to find the real Mary Jane, lost somewhere across the realities. They set off together, and the show ends, right there, mid-search. No reunion, no wedding, cancelled. Why? Not ratings. The show was a hit. It ended because of a war between two executives, producer Avi Arad and the head of Fox Kids, a feud so bitter that the network pulled the plug and Marvel's animation studio shut down entirely. 65 episodes, and the love story at the center of all of them just stopped. Fans spent literal decades asking one question: did Peter ever find her? And then, 26 years later, an answer arrived from the most unexpected place. X-Men 97, the revival of the sister show, included a small scene confirming it. Peter found Mary Jane. They came home, together. A quarter of a century after that final episode aired, the kids who grew up on this show finally got their ending. I'm not going to pretend I didn't get emotional about a 2-second cameo in someone else's show. I absolutely did. So what is this show, really? Here's what my rewatch taught me. This was never just a cartoon about a guy in a red suit. It's 65 episodes about responsibility eating a young man alive, and him choosing to carry it anyway. Peter loses his powers, his health, his identity, his wife, and his happy ending, and the show's answer every single time is that he gets back up, because that's the job. Every version of Spider-Man since, the Raimi films, the games, the Spider-Verse movies, they're all drinking from this well. And the wildest part is that a room full of writers pulled this off while being told they couldn't say the word die or endanger a single pigeon. 2 last gifts before I let you go. First, give Christopher Daniel Barnes his flowers. The voice of this Peter Parker, warm and witty and wounded all at once. Still the definitive Spider-Man voice for an entire generation, and he later returned to voice other Spider-Man in the games and beyond. Second, that theme song burned into your brain? It was composed by Joe Perry, as in, the lead guitarist of Aerosmith. A rock legend wrote the soundtrack to our childhoods, and most of us had no idea. This show was firing on levels we couldn't even see. So now it's your turn, and I want real answers in the comments. Which moment from this show lived in your head all these years? Which villain kept you up at night? Can you still sing the theme song from memory? Because I know I can. And most importantly, which 90s Marvel cartoon do I cover next? Hulk, Fantastic Four, or Iron Man? Majority rules. Subscribe before you go so you don't miss it, and hit that like if this took you back. Because somewhere out there, in some reality, it's still a Saturday morning in the 90s, the cereal is poured, the TV is warming up, and a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man is about to swing across your screen for the very first time. Some things you never outgrow. This show is one of mine.